Welcome to BookEnds Online Edition, produced by the Wadena County Historical Society and Travelin' Storyseller in collaboration with the New York Mills Regional Cultural Center. BookEnds is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Five Wings Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. BookEnds programs from previous authors are now available on the website of the Wadena County Historical Society at www.wadenacountyhistory.org. Today's program will also be available on the website shortly. Next month's BookEnds will be held on Saturday, September 10th, 2022 at 11:30 via Zoom. This program will feature Laura Michelle Diner, who will talk about this new English translation of Sigurd Undset's classic book about 13th century Norway. This month, Freya Manfred will read from her poetry. If you have questions for today's author, feel free to enter them through chat or just speak up. Now, let's welcome to BookEnds Online Edition, Freya Manfred.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be able to be here today. I have not done a poetry reading hardly at all, except, believe it or not, one or two on Zoom. And you don't have any idea on Zoom whether there's anybody that heard you until sometimes days later. You get a little comment, of course. If you want to tell me to tell you a little something about who I am first, I find that extremely difficult. But I am a poet. I write poetry, and I have 8 or 9 published volumes of poetry. My last volume was entitled Loon in Late November Water, and my next one is not due out until next March or April. We have delayed it. It was supposed to be out this fall. So I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. I can ask you, you can tell me what you think. I can't decide between calling it When I Was Young and Old, or should I call it North of Stillwater, since I live in Stillwater with my husband, Thomas Pope, who is a screenwriter, or should I call it Yes and Yes and Yes? And well, we can talk about it later. I can get your opinions. And so today, so I'm a poet. I'm also a memoir writer. I wrote a memoir about my sons, twin sons, who are painters and drawers. They're artists. They're visual artists. They're actually internationally known visual artists because they've had their works accepted in places in other countries, in Europe and in the United States both. And they're very hardworking, wonderful twin sons. And then I was born and raised in Minnesota, and my father is a well-known Minnesota author. His name is Frederick Manfred. He wrote in his lifetime about 22 to 24 novels. A couple of them are still unpublished. And my mother, Mariana Shorber, was a journalist. She wrote for the Minneapolis Tribune for many years, and she did a lot of book reviews for them as well. So I come from a background of a lot of writing and some visual art. I don't know what else I should possibly tell you about myself. I've won some awards. I won a Radcliffe grant, and I won a National Endowment grant, and so on. And I now know at my age of 77 that I'm not a bad writer. I'm a pretty good writer. I don't know what else to tell you. Today, what I was, you could ask me some things later if you would like. The most recent book that I've been working on, as I said, has those 3 possible titles. And I am going to end my time with you, my time of reading, by reading a few of the recent ones, and I'll pass the manuscript around in case you'd like to take a look at a working draft of poetry and what it looks like when it's almost ready to send to the publisher, not quite yet. But to begin, I'd like to read something that my father wrote me in my second memoir, which I hadn't mentioned yet. It's entitled Frederick Manfred, A Daughter Remembers. And in this memoir, I talk about my dad and growing up and living with a man who was a writer. We often, to surprise of many people, lived on what was really a barely subsistence income in the suburbs of Minneapolis, a suburb called Bloomington, when it was not as crowded with houses as it is now. And then we moved down to Laverne, Minnesota, which was close to Dune, Iowa, where he grew up, and lived there for many years also. But I want to, when he was, after he died, it took me 6 weeks to write this memoir. And I wrote it because I missed him so much. He was a very physically present man. He was, people kept saying he's larger than life. There was that quality about him. And missing him so much, I looked through all his old letters. So in my memoir, I included many of the letters that he wrote to me as a young writer. Thought maybe some of you young writers and older and middle-aged writers might be interested in some of the kind of things this man wrote throughout his lifetime. He died at 83 with all this accomplishment behind him of writing novels. One of the things we used to talk about, my dad and I, is dreams. My whole family used to discuss dreams, what we dreamt and what we thought the dreams meant. And we understood that each person was going to interpret the dream differently. And we understood that the most important thing is how you yourself feel about the dream, not what your therapist might feel if you have a therapist, or what your grandmother might feel, or what your sister might feel, but what you feel. But nevertheless, the dreams were important. And here's a letter he wrote to me about dreams. It's entitled, well, it doesn't have a title. It's written in April 5th, 1967. And we were discussing writing. He said to me, he said, cultivate your dreams and your nightmares. They're often the best part of your life. It's a sign, if your private dreamer will give you this, of being a creative person, to be able to remember them. Of most dead people alive today can't remember their dreams, because their dreamer knows they aren't worthy of knowing about them. What I usually do, Freya, if a dream or a nightmare awakens me in the night, is to heist myself up on my pillow a little, not too high, because then the dreamer in you can become alarmed that you're paying too much attention. And I relive the dream or the nightmare after I've had it. You can be thoroughly scared, or you can be thoroughly moved or whatever by it, and yet with a little sideways smile, try to enjoy it too. And don't take on a superior air about your dreams. The smile has to be mostly serious. At any rate, if you allow your dreamer to have the freedom to dream anything it or he or she wants, and then you are circumspect and polite when it or he or she offers the dream to you for you to look at, then you will begin to dream more and more out loud, so to speak, out loud, so to speak. And the more you do this, the tougher and healthier you'll be all your life. I have found this to be extremely true, and it is sometimes very scary, but so is real life. It's a different kind of real life, dreaming. And so I decided that what I would like to do in my reading today for you is go back through some of my books of poetry, maybe 5 or 6 of them, and just choose a couple of poems from each of my books that had to do with a dream or that came from a dream. And sometimes I'll branch off of that. I won't stick with it. But I thought it would be something. I sometimes think people, when I talk about this, they get annoyed. They say, I don't have dreams, I don't remember my dreams, and I don't want to talk about dreams. In fact, I once had a boyfriend who said, if any woman sits down with me in a restaurant and starts to tell me her dream, I excuse myself and I leave. I don't want to hear her dreams. But whatever the situation, here are some poems that came from dreams, in a sense. This is my first book. It's called My Only Home, my first published book. from Red Dragonfly Press, which does so much of my poetry. And it came from a dream that I had when I was pregnant, about 9 months pregnant, and we were living by the ocean in California, my husband and I. The dream is called Tidal Wave because I kept dreaming constantly during my entire pregnancy of tidal waves all the time. Tidal waves were coming, and I had to rescue my twin sons that were coming, and myself and my husband. It was vital that I did this. Tidal wave. How will I swim with both arms holding twin sons? Should I save the soft-hearted boy born with one raised fist? Or the boy who first saw the stars beyond my face? Over and over, I choose them both, stroking toward the light. Why do I feel satisfied riding the curve of my death and theirs? I am doing what I can, even if it is never enough. I just realized, sorry to do this, maybe this happens when you're 77. These series of tidal wave dreams continued after they were born as well. Obviously, this one came after they were born. How would I swim holding two people? Hard enough to swim with none. And I'm going to read this little one here because it fits in nicely for me. When our kids were about 3 years old, I used to hear one of them laughing in his sleep. Apparently, he's having a good dream. To my son, laughing in his sleep. Since he was a baby, I have awaked in the night, startled by the bell-sweet sound of his laugh. I am propelled, cold, knees creaking, across the cluttered floor to his bed. My face above his face, yet, yes, he is asleep and he's smiling. Asleep and smiling. Back in my bed, I hear again his high warble. How I envy this boy who is not mine, who was never mine. How I praise him for making everything in the world right for one moment. That's the vitality and importance of his dreams. I hope he still does that. And I want to read the last one from here. Most of the books, I'll just read you two, but this one is called Grass. This is a dream that came to me again twice. It mostly came at the end of a time of sleep. You know, the time in bed where you're just sort of coming up out of sleep and you start to get a feeling like you're still in a dream, but you're not in a dream. It's both. Kind of both. I'm sure you've had that experience. And it's called Grass. And if you can believe it, when you hear those words from the beginning of the poem, this was a time when even then in our streets of America, there were guns roaring and there were forests dying and there were lakes choking. And it was decades ago, 3 decades ago. Grass. I lie in bed with death on my mind, with abused children, gangs clashing, guns roaring, forests dying, lakes choking. And I can feel it. Grass shooting up inside the soles of my feet, tunneling through my knees, tall and long and lemony, tangled blades of green, feathering my thighs, soft as lips, filling my belly, hustling, hissing, rustling into my heart. I sit at my desk, my best self, unseen, unspoken, words of pain and love and praise, words I owe, dying on the floor. But the grass grows, the teeming grass grows. The longer it grows, the thicker it gets. The thicker it gets, the wetter it gets. The wetter it gets, the greener it gets. The greener it gets, the more my heart shines. The grass flowers into my arms, my fingers up through my neck at a speed faster than the sound of it thrashing and whispering in my throat. It sprouts from my eyes, my nose, my throat. With a green groan, it replaces my graying hair. my brain swelling with seeds of grass, my mind supple, my throat singing. Even in my despair, my feet twitch all night like roots. My womb fills with the juice of the grass. My heart fills with green light laden with green shadow as grass echoes grass. I expected to lie down and grow old and lose my grip. I expected to scream and weep and apologize. I expected to watch my loved ones die and get sick and go mad, or get sick and go mad. I expected to fold into the death around me. But one night, as I floated above sleep, this grass started to grow in my feet, and it's been growing ever since. The grass croons, the grass cradles me, the grass carries me out of myself into the world I hate and first fell in love with as a green child. That's one of my favorite older poems. This next book is called Swimming with a 100-Year-Old Snapping Turtle. I'm well aware that there are no 100-year-old snapping turtles. There are apparently some alligator snapping turtles that will get to be even 150, but they're not in Minnesota. I have seen a snapping turtle in the lake, which was absolutely huge in the lake we're living near now, which is called Little Carnelian, near Stillwater, Minnesota. But at any rate, it's still swimming with a 100-year-old snapping turtle. And here's a dream that I had. We moved, Tom and I, from California at some point. Tom was sick of California. He's a Hollywood screenwriter. He was sick of the Hollywood people. The parties were hilarious. I only went to one party in Hollywood, and after that, I never went again. All the women were wearing very high heels, and they had very tight jeans on, and they had silk skirts, and they just were talking and chatting away about absolutely nothing. And it was just sort of horrifying me. And after that, when Tom would say there was a party, I wouldn't go. But in general, so he wanted to go back to the Midwest, or he never was in the Midwest. He was a New Jersey guy, but he wanted to be somewhere where we would raise our kids. So anyway, we moved into this house in Bloomington, Minnesota, right next to the house where I was living when I was a little kid. And even though I had parents whom I admire greatly, they were absolutely brilliant writers, they were very sweet and loving and caring in many ways, they also had a lot of problems. And so did some people, other people in my family. So I began to have a series of dreams, dream after dream after dream, living in this house next to where I grew up. At first, I wished that we had never moved there, and I wanted to move away, back to California, back to high heels and silk blouses. But anyway, this is called Rescuing the Children. Almost all of mine were rescued in dream after dream when I moved next door to the house where I was born. The willful 2-year-old crawled under the fence to freedom, joined by curious 3, sensitive 4, bold 5, careful 6, and 7, a seeker with faraway eyes. 12 escaped too, forever working on her chores like a little coal miner, while lanky 10 jumped hand in hand with 8 from their perch in a friendly tree. Even pimply 13, who grew 4 inches in 1 year, clawed her way to safety, bleeding a ribbon of blood. And sad, lumbering 15 was joined by 9, perhaps the strongest, because she wanted to free herself until she waited to free herself until most of the rest had flown. 11 and 14 stayed behind, too fearful to leave. But every one of us celebrates the fact that 9 can fly, nor will she lose this art until death takes us all. Now, I don't know if you have a sense of yourself that way. I love to hear about it. I'd like to get to know you well enough, to all of you, that there were all these children in you. You were 2 and you were 13 and you were 9 and you were all these ages, and some of them escape better than others from bad times and some are less so. That was just my theory when I wrote it. And it's probably some psychological theory or something that I got. See, was there something else I was going to? Oh, here's one poem that my husband likes in this book. It's called If I Can't Sleep. It's called If I Can't Sleep. I wrote this when our kids were young. If I can't sleep, I can't write. If I can't ease my son's pain, I can't sleep. If I hadn't made love with my husband, I wouldn't have given birth. If I hadn't given birth, our son wouldn't be born, wouldn't be in pain. If I hadn't been born among towering maples, I wouldn't have tried to imitate growing things. If I hadn't trusted trees, I wouldn't be so hurt by humans who aren't the same as trees. For when we suffer, we want the world to suffer with us. If I wasn't in pain or full of joy, I couldn't write. And if I can't write, I can't sleep. I'm in big trouble. Well, I think I get a couple more books I'd like to read from. Here, this is my favorite book of the books I've written. It's called Speak, Mother. A friend of mine, she was saying to me, I was saying, why didn't this one sell as the other ones? Later ones sold better than the earlier ones did. She said, oh, Freya, it's because of the title. Nobody likes their mother. You shouldn't have called it Speak, Mother. And isn't there a famous novel by a famous novelist called Speak? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Freya Manfred. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. What is it?
It's a young adult novel. It's about a high school girl that gets assaulted and retreats. And then in her next year, by the end of her next year, she learns how to speak for herself, for who she is, instead of letting everybody else say.
So a high school girl learns to speak for herself. What's the name of the novel again?
Speak by Laurie Anderson.
It's just called Speak.
Mhm.
Oh, well.
And there's not Speak Memory,
Oh, and Speak Memories, another novel. Is that
the Russian.
the Russian writer whose name I can't think? He wrote Lolita.
Nabokov.
Yes,
Nabokov.
Nabokov. Yeah, Nabokov.
Speak Memory.
Yeah, but as for some reason, she says nobody likes their mother. So when you called your book Speak Mother, nobody was wanted to read about it. So it's too bad. I had a father that did so much talking. He was pretty much would fill up the room as a novelist. Many novelists are quiet, but he wasn't. And so he would talk all the time. And my mom didn't speak much. So when she was dying and after she died, I think I was trying to speak with everything I could remember about her. So many of the poems in here are about my mother, actually. But I'll just read a couple poems here at the start about dreaming and dreams again. This one is called The Dream That Made Us Dreamers. The Dream That Made Us Dreamers. Some dreams take us into our deepest heart, inside our childhood home, inside a blood-filled vein, inside a stone. And when we wake, every dream, animal, has become part of us, those that raged and those that lacked our skin, calm as sunshine. Who can understand the power of these dreams? It's hard to find a place for them in daily life, where we rarely speak of what we fear, need, or love. Our dead ancestors trust what is older than time, and children and animals know we are more than our words or faces. Even small dreams can take us somewhere. Where is mother's purse? What stranger has parked in our driveway? Watch out for the wolf. Dreams know where to find us. They creep inside our mouths as we sigh and snore. They come from the rhythm of our breath, a broken cup, a tree in the yard, a pin in its cushion. Our dreams were born with the big dream, the day the stars and the galaxies were born. Our dreams were born with the big dream, the day the stars and galaxies were born, and nothing gave birth to everything. Our dreams take us back where we belong, for we've been gone a long time from the place where we began. I don't really know where dreams came from, so I was trying to write about that, I believe. And then I wrote this one as a little more childlike, probably. It's called Everything Dreams. Flowers and bees dream, and worn silver tree stumps where mushrooms sprout when it rains, and lichen on red rocks that stand like sentinels. Lilies of the valley carry me anywhere in time, and the perfumed dreams of peonies overwhelm me, like the dreams of unhappy parents or kindly friends. All these speak to each other in dreams and answer my dreams with theirs. Old prairie fence posts have barbed wire dreams that tremble with the wind and sing of journeys. Colts have hops kicking dreams, and aging horses have gentle aching dreams that make me cry. I love the dreams of dolphins and eagles most because they carry gods and demons on their backs. I used to fear the monsters in my dreams, but a wild one in my basement was more afraid of me than I was of him, and wept when I said goodbye. Even when we die, we don't stop dreaming. We dream on as water, as dust, as boiling rock, as bone. Dream on. I don't know if I want to read one here about my grandma, because I've been listening to the trains coming through here in Wadena. It's amazing to see the trains come through. Close or far away, they're very powerful. And I just remember this poem I wrote about my grandma. When we used to live in Bloomington, the men would come from the train tracks nearby during the Depression to get food. Grandma Shorba's ragamuffin stew. During World War II, Grandma Shorba handed plates of bread and meat to strangers who asked for work in exchange for food. After chopping wood and mending fences, the lean, stoop-shouldered men went on their way. May God watch over them, Grandma said. I was glad I didn't have to follow them down the long train tracks silvering west. I didn't want to sleep beside a strange campfire around the bend in the next world, but I worried how they'd survive, and I asked my parents if they could live with us. My begging only made everyone nervous. Maybe Grandma's stories of the Good Samaritan and the loaves and fishes were not true. If I'd been in charge, I'd have asked those men to stay. But Grandma, who trusted God, fed them, then sent them on their way. Sort of mixed feelings one has. And then here's a poem that it's at the end, and it's about my mother. But it's really about the lakes, who are in many ways, I love lakes, and I think that they're in a sense a real mother to me often. It's the dream. This is called I Tell the Lake Tells Me. I tell the lake she's gone, how she left, her last days, last hours, last minutes, last words, until she no longer gripped my hand. My mother, I tell the lake. As the sun goes down, long sentences full of secrets, fears, wishes, and loss flow out over the darkening water. and every wave nods back. Lake tells me, I am here, surrounding you, taking your measure, weighing your songs and your tears, and I will always be here. So keep talking about who your mother was and who you are, my little one, my tiny fleeting love. Oh, I like to hear about your mothers now. I have just, let's see, I don't even see how much time we have left. Oh, we have a little more time. It was the latest book that was published of mine. It's called Loon in Late November Water. And I want to read a little bit from a book called Raising Twins, a couple pages, which is about my kids. This is Loon in Late November Water. And this is a poem that came out of, it started with a dream. I dreamt I was at a literary party where everybody's there and everybody's literary. Very different from Hollywood parties. And people are swarming around. I remember seeing the one party I went to, the Lenfesti's house in Minneapolis, Jim and Susan Lenfesti. They have 200 or 300 people at these parties. It's ridiculous. I remember seeing in one corner, way in one corner, was Louise Erdrich, the wonderful Native American writer. And in the far other corner of the room was her husband, Michael Doris. That was his name, I believe. Of course, he's not alive anymore. I remember him watching her. He was watching every person she talked to. He was watching every move she made. And it scared me a little. Something about it scared me. And then later, when I was talking to her very briefly, I never got to know her very well, but they did write a book together. And there was a time where they wrote, he used to be a wonderful editor of her books at first. He would help her, after she'd written it, he'd go over and give her suggestions very helpfully. And but when they started writing the books together, there were several of them. And this is just my opinion. I felt that the books went downhill. I like the way she wrote herself. I like her voice when she was not writing with him. And the same for him. He wrote one about a yellow raft in blue water, I believe. And he too was better on his own voice. Again, that's just my opinion. But anyway, speaking of these literary parties, there were just, I didn't really have a great time at them. But anyway, so I wrote this poem based on a partial dream that I had. It's called Fear of Literary Parties. I stop before I enter a room full of writers. As the animal inside me cries, get away before it's too late. Towering there, whiskey in hand, is the world-famous raconteur who wants every other writer at the bar to fail. Stalwart in his shadow, sipping wine, is the sly critic who says poems and fiction should never tell a story. Behind him, martini-eyed, his fourth wife wonders if anyone remembers that she's a writer too. And gliding among them, a chitter, is the wildly successful poet, toiling a long cerebral thesis no one dares to interrupt. And this scenario continues while I escape to the moonlit porch to settle my heart and gaze, brooding at the diamond white glimmer of Los Angeles, the lilac-scented Minnesota lakes, the untamed canyons of Manhattan, until an older woman poet standing beside me says, "You're still young, still strong, a true poet, good as any. So come, devour my blue vein stories, ripe with what I sing. You'll become richer than you were before you arrived. We'll be conspirators outside the circle of cause and coups, monstrous in our needs for words from the blessed undead, the sacred long dead, and ourselves and all the other hardworking, human, hard-writing, human liars. I don't know if I could read that. Fear of the Literary Parties. This is called Dream Lake. I was writing about the lake where we live. Dream Lake. This is my dream lake. When it's calm and sunny, clouds float on the water until the wind rises, and the wind always rises, full of leaves, raging with rain or snow. I sit on the shore for hours with my arms around myself while the dream lake holds me in its sway. Soft or loud, the sound of waves never leaves me. You may think that I'm asleep or lost, but even when the lake is frozen indigo, the water beneath is ready, throbbing with thin, thick, broken, unbreakable skin. This is who I am and always will be, a naked voice surrounded by continents. This poem is called What She Learned About Love from Dreams. This is a whole series of dreams that were used to make this poem. What she learned about love from dreams. If every man you ever loved is in your dreams, no wonder you're afraid of dying. So honor all of your lovers with a kiss and ride the tides forevermore. If a woman steals your seashell with the rainbow skin and your lover won't look you in the eye, march right in and take back your iridescent soul. They had no right to swipe it and lie about it too. And if you have nowhere to go where you feel loved, listen to that old sea song and you'll start to sing again. You can push the heart right out of your chest trying to get your lover back, but when you've driven him halfway home, he'll spit in your eye. Be careful, you're older, you're wiser. The next time a tornado races toward your home, you may save the one you love and have no strength left to save yourself. Remember that small green tree frog who slept all winter in your begonia and began croaking the first day of spring? Well, he is not a dream. Don't put him out until all danger of frost is over. It's kind of an odd poem, I think. It's kind of weird. It's, I mean, it's so many different, it came about 5 different dreams made the poem. And the only thing that's not a dream is the tree frog, which we had all night, all winter in one of our plants. And it was there all winter and it didn't sing. It just sat there crouched up and I think hibernating. And then when spring came, it started to sing. So then we let it outside. I want to read one thing from my twin book, and I want to read a new poem or two. So let me, I think I'll do a new, I think I'm gonna, I don't know which to go. I think I'm gonna end up with this little story about my kids and just read a few from my new manuscript. Again, I don't know whether I can stick with the dreams this time, but I'll read the first poem, which I'm trying to decide whether I should use the title for it or the last line of it for my whole book. And I'll just read that one first. Actually, and before I read that one, I want to read one other one because during this COVID time, it's been really horrible for everybody, very hard, I know. And there's been other hard times in the world, but it's been a hard time in COVID times. And so one day I was thinking to myself, what do I most desire? And I was writing about that and writing about that, and I've got some poems about it. Then the next day I said to myself, now in a sad time like COVID, what do I desire the most, And this is what I came up with. In a sad time, what do I desire? To laugh a liquid quicksilver laugh, every gurgling morsel of me cascading like water over singing stones. To laugh until my heart and lungs are empty and go on laughing until I'm well fed and fall in love with everything. To let go of my place and my body in that place and surrender to non-stop gasps, giggles, chortles, and chuckles, to laugh until I cry and discover the sapphires tumbling from my eyes are tears rising from a deep sea of hope and sorrow, to laugh because the more I remember and then forget, the more I will be free. I wish I could find a poem that was funny in here, but I'm having trouble with that. Where is something funny? I don't know. This is about the dead. I've lost a lot of friends in the past 2 or 3 years, and I know many of you have as well. Strangely, none of them have passed away from this COVID plague. In our case, it's just other reasons for their deaths, young and old, including my publisher at Red Dragonfly Press, Scott King, who was 56 when he had a heart attack just last May. So I wrote this poem. It's called How to Frighten the Dead. How to Frighten the Dead. Don't die. The dead want you to stay alive. Don't overeat, overspend, overworry, overcontrol everyone you hate or love, even those who want what is not yours to give. Don't listen when your dead friends and family beg you for less noise, less greed, less pain, less loss of heart or head or hands. Don't tell them you've forgotten that they're still part of you, or how shocked and frightened you felt as they died, helpless to ease their journey or your own. Or why not do what does not frighten the dead? Remember, a piece of you dies every day. You can't accept your grief about what's missing from your life, the bond you shared with them. And then wait for your daily dream of living long and well to swim in with the tide. This will not frighten them, and you don't want to scare them away. It's kind of a cute music poem too. Oh, I have one last. Okay, I have one last one. This is called When I Was Young and Old. Yes, I was gonna.
How long have you been working on this collection?
This
Almost ready to publish.
I would say 3/4 of the about half of the poems in it were even written before, in a very rough draft, before my last book was published in 2018. Maybe even probably while that one was going to the publisher, I was starting to write new things. And I went through 2 years where I just wrote a piece of fiction instead, which I haven't done anything with yet. It's kind of a memoir about, it's called Hello, I Love You, the memoir. And then I went back to writing. So I would say, I went back to writing poems. So I would say I've been writing since, well, I would say most of these are probably, half of them, I mean, were probably written in the last 2 years. The other half were written even before the last book was published, but I didn't feel that they were ready. I revise a lot. I can have 50 revisions of one poem. And then at other times, as you may find from your own work, I'll have a poem and it's pretty much done the first time I write it, and it needs a few tweaks for the second and third version, maybe. So I don't know if you find that when you're writing. Do you have any other questions? We could do some other questions too. At the moment.
The first poem that you wrote, the last 2 lines about never being able to do enough as a parent. I just thought that summed up just swimming with trying to swim and carrying 2 babies at the same time. And that line just really summed up both that feeling of not being able to do enough to swim and hold 2 babies and being a parent, because you just every single day of your life feel like no matter how much you do.
It's never enough. Yeah. We're talking about how it's never enough to when you're a parent. You feel like you're never doing enough. It's the same when you're with people that are very ill and you're helping them weekly, and it doesn't ever feel like it's enough, because it's just not, it's too bad because we put so much pressure on ourselves in some ways to try to.
So what's the process as a writer of poems, and the dreamer in the dreams, and they come to you? Do you hold them and jot down scraps with your morning coffee?
The question is, what is the process with these dreams? Do I, when I first wake up in the morning, perhaps write down a few notes about them with my morning coffee and so on? How do I handle the dream? Some dreams I tell myself in my own mind, sort of a couple of times, so I won't forget them. And then I find myself, when I have an hour free later in the day, using them in a poem, or at least starting a poem with them, starting it, knowing that I don't have to follow exactly what the dream said or did. It can be just a start. At other times, I tell a dream to Tom, my husband, or sometimes to a friend, and that seems to solidify it more. It stays more memorable to me for the future. I don't write my dreams down every morning, as I did when I was younger. Before I had kids, I definitely wrote dreams down. And once our kids moved out for college and went out to live their lives, I was a little more likely then too to write down a dream. But I think in general, I just would, about a week after a dream, it would either come up in a poem or it wouldn't. And I would, but what was regular, or the regular part of the path, was that I would try to write every single day for at least an hour. Even if nothing comes down, nothing goes down on the page at all that I really like. And that's fine. But that in that period of saying, okay, my brain knows that 10 o'clock every day, I'm going to have that hour, or approximately 10, it could be 11, it could be 9, But then the dream, having been already told by me to myself at least once, or to Tom or to somebody, it will come up then into the poem, because the part of me that is the writer remembers it then. What were you going to add?
So actually, it's a kind of another question or comment or tangent. Do you ever find yourself, when you are out in the world, walking, or especially driving, and you see something, and then words come together to describe it, and you just love those words so much, or then you're focusing on the words in your mind, and then you look up and realize you have no idea where you are because you missed your turn, and you kept walking, or you've gotten distracted because you were just.
Yeah. I don't know how people are going to know what you ask. Are they going to hear this? Or
Go ahead.
they'll hear. Well, to answer, okay, do I ever drive along and suddenly I'm thinking about this amazing line or a line, and then I forget I forget where I am? I don't think so. I don't think I'm like that. I remember my dad, as a fiction writer, was always taking this little black thing out of his pocket, and he'd quickly jot something down while he was conversing with someone, or when he was sitting outside, or even if he was driving down the road, he'd quickly pull over and write it. Because if he didn't, he felt he couldn't remember the line later. But to not know where I suddenly am doesn't happen to me very well. I think I have two ways of being in myself, and one of them is just very in the now. I'm in the now. I'm going down the road. These are pine trees. I love them. My eyes are registering a lot, but my brain isn't trying to write. My brain doesn't try to write until I have my time of day when I write. Tom, when you're going down the road, do you suddenly forget where you are, or not forget where you are, but in a sense, forget where you are, and then I know you get up in the middle of the night and write things down.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah. Tom will think of a line that he's writing for a screenplay or for anything, and he'll get up and quickly write it, because if he says to himself, "Oh, this is a great and brilliant idea," and he waits till morning, it's not there then.
Gone.
It's gone. So
And I said, well, this is such a good idea. I'm for sure gonna remember this.
yes.
This is such a great idea. No way can I forget this done. You know, so I'll go to sleep and, you know, so I have to do it. It's a pain in the ass.
I've had that. I'm a little more likely at night to wake up and say that was a good idea, and then I will kind of jot a little something. But you weren't asking about jotting. You were asking about losing. Well, so this happens to you, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice.
In a way, in a way, it's, we each take a different path into our subconscious. We each take a different road into the creative part of ourselves. You know, you have to get to the same destination, but you know, you might go to the left fork, I might go to the right fork. We have different ways, but you have to get to that place where your ideas are born. And it doesn't matter what road you take, you just got to get there. For me, it's middle of the night. I mean, when I wake up in the morning and there's 3 or 4 little pages of scribbled notes on the side of the bed, and I don't even know what the hell they say. And I think, oh, man, I sort of, so that's how I find that destination. And but driving down the road or making dinner, it doesn't matter. The type trick is to find that place. For me, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, does some of this get registered? What you people? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I just want to make sure people hear your questions. Hear what Tom said. Okay. I had one more poem I could read, and I had one little thing from my twins book.
Certainly.
I don't know which one to.
Yes, they are.
Pardon?
Yes, please.
Well, okay. This is the one where okay. This is a poem called "When I Was Young and Old," and again, there's dreams in here. When I was young and old, out of nowhere, we found ourselves stretched out under the sun on the yoga lawn. Hi. Yeah, we'll be done in 5 minutes. Okay. Out of nowhere, we found ourselves stretched out under the sun on the yoga lawn, and I saw how lively, how supple he was in each new pose as I breathed in yes, and out yes. And when we sat down to eat, I heard every word he spoke, yes, as if he knew I would always understand. And I asked for soup that was green and wild, and he wanted to taste it, and I said yes again. And on the mountains we slid so smoothly through snowdrifts, down icy steep ravines on our 2 simple matter-of-fact feet, yes. And when I wandered off alone one day, the wolf who followed us did not attack, but went his solitary way. So I felt safe, yes. And when we lay down together at last, I was amazed how much care he gave to my humble, forgotten ears and cosmic toes. And when he kissed me, I slipped like lightning into another world. Yes, and yes, and yes. This all happened when he was young and I was old, and I was young and he was old. And it still happens whenever a dream arrives at night to assure me it was all meant to be. But now I wonder, is my dream more alive than the poem I write about the dream? And is my life as alive, as real as the poem or the dream? Yes, and yes, and yes. Yes to all of them. Well, I think that's good. I think I can just stop there. I can read the thing for my kids or not, but should I read it? Yeah, they want to clear the room now. They've only got 2 minutes, right? What do you want to do? Should I read it?
You have time for one more?
I have time, but I don't know how you feel.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll just read it. This is from the book I wrote about raising twins. And this is when our sons were 3. And we had a lot of discussions with them, Tom and I, about God, not knowing about what God is ourselves in many ways, almost always. They were both fascinated about God and they were fascinated about infinity. Rowan and Bly were as their names. And they grappled with these concepts at the same developmental level as twins. And they kind of helped each other delve more deeply, I think, into the mystery of God or whatever God is. And they followed up on each other's questions, challenged each other, and so on, kind of on an equal level. So one day Bly asked, Is God the chair? Yes, Tom said. In a way, God is the chair. So we can sit on God? Rowan asked. Yes, and he can sit on you. Is God in the table too? Bly wondered. Yes, in a way, Tom said. He is in the table. God is everywhere. God is everything. But where? Where is he? Rowan asked. Well, you can't see him, Tom said. He's everywhere, but you can't really see him. Then God is a secret, Rowan said. Exactly, I said. But is God the biggest secret? Bly asked. I don't know, Tom said. What do you think? Well, he might be if he really is everywhere, the biggest secret, Bly said. A few days later, the boys were lolling around in the kitchen, blissfully sucking on popsicles, and Rowan said, Is God a popsicle? Well, sure, I guess God is a popsicle since he's everything, I said. Then I can eat God, Rowan said. Yes, God is everything, even the food you eat, Tom said. Dad, is God infinity? Bly asked. Yes, God is infinity. I know what infinity is, Bly said. He made a circle with his arms. This is infinity. That's right, Tom said. Infinity is like a circle. Infinity is 0? Bly queried. That's right, Tom said. But 0 is nothing, Bly said. Infinity is the biggest number in the world, Tom said. You can't see infinity? Bly asked. Not really, no, Tom said. Then God is infinity, Bly said. That's very possible, Tom said. Is Grandma God? Rowan wondered. Yes, in a way, Grandma is God, and everyone is God. Is Grandma bigger than God? Rowan wondered. No, God is biggest, Tom said. Is God bigger than anything? Rowan asked. Yes, he's the biggest thing in the world, Tom said. He's also the smallest, I said. And sometimes he's not called God. He's called Wakantanka or Gitche Manito or Allah. God is not Manitou, Bly cried, outraged. He's just called God. Well, you're called Bly, and you're also called Nicholas, so why can't God be called different names? Bly is just Bly. Don't you say another word or I'll throw you out the window. Well, you don't have to do that, I said. A few days later, Bly came to me. Let me tell you something, Mom. I had a dream last night. The dream was so secret, it was more secret than God. More secret than God, I said. It was so secret, I can't tell you. It was so secret, I can't remember it. That's amazing, Bly. You can't hear it and you can't draw it, but you can buy it in a store. And then Bly whispered in my ear, it's 10 fig Newtons. So that's kids. Thank you.